Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I've been continuing the conversation on the pro-life front, and a piece caught my eye. Pro-lifers should push for these realistic policy goals. And a lot of this is stemming from the fact that the Trump administration, while we have to acknowledge this, has done a tremendous amount of good in terms of certain forefronts of the pro-life fight, the fight for life in the womb. We also have had certain obstacles and pushbacks. So realistic policy has to be the way forward. Joining me to have a conversation about this is Dr. Michael New, who is a professor at the Busch School of Law. He's also an associate fellow, a research fellow at the Charlotte Lozier Institute, and he is one of the strongest voices in the pro-life movement in the United States. Michael, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
Well, I'm very glad that you've made the time to speak with us. I want to begin by talking about your piece in the National Review. We're talking about realistic policy, and before we start talking about the policy fronts per se, the topics itself, can you tell us about the milieu right now and why we have to really carefully think about how we think about policy?
Well, sure. I mean, we have some unique opportunities now. We have a Republican president, the White House. Republicans control both the House and the Senate, and that does create some opportunities for us. But the post-Dobbs landscape creates some challenges and some new challenges and some things we're not accustomed to dealing with. You know, that we've seen a big surge in chemical abortions during the past several years. We've also seen a big surge in telehealth abortions. That the most recent data we have indicate that about 25% of all abortions are done by telehealth, where a woman doesn't meet with a provider in person. What she does is goes online, consults with some medical professional online, and gets the abortion pills mailed to her. And so there's, again, a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges that pro-lifers just need to be aware of.
So let's talk about the unique opportunities that we've been given, some of the quote-unquote wins, the ways in which we have had strides towards victory.
Right. Essentially, President Trump has done some good things. I mean, he, like a lot of Republican presidents, put in place a Mexico City policy that prevents U.S. tax dollars from going to foreign entities that perform or provide or advertise for abortion. That's been a win. Shortly after he was inaugurated, he pardoned several pro-lifers who were in jail because they engaged in some civil disobedience. And again, the penalties, I think, were very disproportionate, and that certainly was good. He also signed a bill that defunded Planned Parenthood, and we've just gotten word today that, I think a facility in Florida has closed, that some 40 or 50 Planned Parenthood facilities have closed down because they're no longer getting federal funding. So, Trump has done some good things that we should acknowledge and certainly applaud.
And acknowledging that, therefore, doesn't mean that we don't look at the areas in which there could be some improvement. So what are some of those areas?
Yeah, the main thing we really need from the Trump administration is some limits on chemical abortions. Mm-hmm. The one thing that's undermining a lot of the very strong pro-life laws we passed after the Dobbs decision is these telehealth abortions, where, again, women in these pro-life states can go online, talk to a medical professional, and have abortion pills mailed to them. Now, telehealth abortions were only meant to be a temporary measure during the COVID-19 pandemic. That's when the FDA changed policy. Prior to the pandemic, women seeking chemical abortions had to have a face-to-face, in-person examination with a medical professional. Okay, that ended during the pandemic. The Biden administration continued this unwise policy, and so far, the Trump administration has also continued this unwise policy. The Trump administration actually has within its power, like today or tomorrow, they could end telehealth abortions. They could put the old rules back in that would require that women seeking chemical abortions at least have an in-person meeting with a medical professional. So, that's really driving abortion numbers up. It's really weakening the pro-life laws we've worked hard to pass since Dobbs. It's been a top priority for pro-lifers, and I think the Trump administration really has not taken action on.
I want to ask about the question of Planned Parenthood in terms of Planned Parenthood funding. If you could go a little deeper on that front. What do we know has happened, hasn't happened, and what should we see as a direction moving forward?
Well, one thing we've always done well as a movement in terms of priorities is trying to stop taxpayer funding of abortion. And we started that with a Hyde Amendment back in 1976, and ever since that was upheld in 1980, by and large, the federal government's been out of the business of funding elective abortions through Medicaid. We've taken this a step forward. We really don't want Planned Parenthood to get any federal taxpayer dollars. That the argument, which is a good argument, is that money is fungible, and even if that money is on paper going to something else, if it's going to Planned Parenthood, it's indirectly funding abortion. So the budget that the Republicans, passed last year with President Trump's signature pretty much stopped all federal funding from going to Planned Parenthood. So essentially our taxpayer dollars don't directly pay for abortion. They don't indirectly pay for abortion. And that's been very positive, that roughly, 50 Planned Parenthood facilities have shut down. Planned Parenthood gets about a third of their income, a third of their revenue from taxpayer dollars. I was saying that, big abortion needs big government. So the fact that, they're not getting taxpayer dollars, means they're shutting down facilities. About 50 have closed. And that's a good thing that they're not performing abortions. There's fewer people working in the abortion industry. They're not promoting these sex education programs that encourage all kinds of promiscuity. They're not giving out these contraceptives. So that's been a big step forward toward building a culture of life.
In terms of those steps forward, which we're very grateful for, let's also switch gears a little in terms of late-term abortions, because that's another area we would like to see further advancement in terms of the cause of the unborn.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Roe v. Wade was handed down, or I should say when Roe v. Wade was reversed by the Dobbs decision, obviously many states have moved quickly and passed strong protective laws, but the federal government can come in and pass strong pro-life laws as well. I mean, we saw a federal partial birth abortion ban signed by President Bush in the 2000s. And there's nothing really stopping elected officials at the federal level from, placing limits on abortion that are federal. And they could go ahead and pass a ban on, third trimester abortions. That's the policy that many European countries have. That's something that there's not a lot of attention being given to right now. But, states have a role to protect the preborn, but so does the federal government. And there's really no reason why the federal government couldn't step up and, at least start moving toward passing a ban toward late-term abortions as kind of an incremental step to, a day where, all preborn children are protected in law. So, that's something we could see, we'd like to see some action on. So far we've not, but it's certainly a good and worthy policy goal.
Let's talk about future projections in terms of 2028, the 2028 presidential elections. What are we speculating in terms of strong chances of what's going to happen, and what's that going to do to the pro-life coalition?
Well, I think 2028 is a unique opportunity. That I'd say 2024, due to a lot of circumstances beyond our control, pro-lifers did not have a lot of leverage. That when President Trump declared that he wanted to seek the Republican nomination for president, it was his nomination to lose. There wasn't much pro-lifers could do to help him. There wasn't much we could do to hurt him. So he didn't necessarily make the same kind of commitments to us in 2024 that he did in 2020. I mean, in 2020, he really needed pro-life votes to get through the primary, and he made some commitments to us, which by and large he upheld. His judicial nominations are excellent, and they did lead to the reversal of Roe v. Wade. Now, 2028 is going to be competitive. We don't know who's going to run necessarily. There's a good chance that Vice President Vance will run. There might be a chance that Ron DeSantis will run. There might be a chance that Marco Rubio will run. There's going to be a lot of competition for the Republican nomination. So there's more competition. That means that, these candidates are competing for pro-life votes, and pro-lifers have some leverage. So we might get more, promises. We might get more commitments out of the group of candidates running in 2028 than we got from President Trump in 2024.
What are we seeing on the other side, the Democratic Party and the pro-abortion coalition?
Well, I mean, the Democratic Party sadly continues to move further and further left on sanctity of life issues. They become more politically liberal. They become more secular. And it's kind of too bad. I mean, at one point, the Hyde Amendment used to be bipartisan. We used to get a lot of Democrats who would vote against taxpayer funding of elective abortions. Now, with maybe one exception, pretty much every Democrat elected official opposes the Hyde Amendment. So not only do they want to make abortion legal, they want abortion paid for with our taxpayer dollars. So I'm not seeing much that's real interesting out of them. They're going to keep supporting legal abortion. They're going to keep supporting taxpayer funding of abortion. I think they're going to continue to kind of harass and pester pro-life pregnancy help centers. I think they'll try to get judges nominated that would, frankly, pass a Roe v. Wade type decision that would legalize abortion again throughout all 9 months of pregnancy. So again, they're not our allies, they're not our friends, and I see nothing really in the future that really gives me a lot of short-term hope.
Comment on the size and the importance, therefore, of the pro-life coalition as an electoral bloc.
Well, essentially, the way things are right now, the pro-life movement is very invested in the Republican Party, and those are the political allies that we have. And while they're not perfect, they're certainly doing more things for us than the Democrats would. And, there are people in Republican administrations who will return our phone calls and listen to what we have to say. Ideally, in the ideal world, we'd have two pro-life parties competing with each other. See who could do the most to protect the preborn. That's not the world we live in. So, I never believe in despair. I think that, some local races, there are certainly pro-life Democrats who can and do win, and, they can certainly do some good things in elected office. And, I would like to see, pro-lifers exert more influence within the Democratic Party, but I just think that's a long-term project that may take a while to come to fruition.
Michael, tremendous honor and joy. Thank you very much for all your work in the pro-life front.
Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
My guest has been Michael New, and he's been walking us through a realistic take of what's happening in the political sphere in terms of the pro-life fight, and therefore realistic policy positions we ought to fight for. Stay tuned for the next hour. I'm Marcus Peter.